members of our staff. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Community Development Committee for May 7th, 2018. First, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve our agenda this afternoon.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Our agenda is adopted. Next, we have two sets of minutes to approve. I'd entertain a motion to approve our April 2nd meeting minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any changes or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. April 2nd minutes are adopted. Let's do the same with our April 16th minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Those minutes are also adopted. We have a number of business items. Members, the first item is 2018-95, a recommendation to revise the deadline for review of amendments to the 2030 comprehensive plans from June until December of this year. Lisa Brajas is here to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members. Just a little bit of background to refresh your memories. You may recall, perhaps, after we adopted Thrive in June of 2014, this committee and the council were interested in how we were going to be implementing Thrive and how we were going to be reviewing local comprehensive plans in relationship to your newly adopted plan. So as part of that process, you adopted business item 2014-143 that we link to regularly in our comp plan amendment reviews that refers to how the council will review a range of things from forecasts to amendments and at different time frames along the way before system statements, after system statements are issued, and then until what date the council would continue to consider amendments to 2030 comprehensive plans, which are the current adopted plans of local communities. As part of this policy, you included a deadline for review of amendments to 2030 plans that is June 30th of this year. And since, say about last fall, we have been hearing from a number of communities that have expressed concern with that deadline with amendments to 2030 plans. While they are actively working on their 2040 comprehensive plans and recognize some of that mismatch, they're not quite done yet with their 2040 plans. They're not in place. As you know, you've only seen 3 plans before you so far, but many are in process. And at the same time, many communities, especially suburban communities, are feeling a much hotter development market than they had in previous years and in comparison to when we originally adopted this policy in 2014. So many have expressed concern with their ability to both support development proposals that might be coming forward to them that are not consistent with their 2030 plans ahead of adopting their 2040 plans and coming through our process and kind of missing this window through the remainder of this building season through the end of the year. So after a lot of consideration and debate, council staff have proposed for you a deadline to just move that, a proposal to move that deadline from June 30th of 2018 till December 31st of 2018. That gets us through the entire year. That allows communities that flexibility to consider development proposals that may be on sites that they hadn't previously considered. As I noted in a report I gave to you earlier this year regarding comp plan amendments, a lot of our amendments are for switching land uses, particularly from non-residential land uses to accommodate residential uses. And this is particularly true in suburban communities where we're seeing a lot of that trend. So it's a little unpredictable in nature. Communities aren't sure where that might occur, and they don't necessarily want to give carte blanche to that either, but want to be very specific and have the opportunity to review those proposals. So because we're uncertain about how many amendments we may receive, we do want to include some advisory comments for communities regarding our ability to continue to provide the types of services that we have for them, including our review and comment on draft 2040 comprehensive plans. We refer to those as preliminary plans. Right now, we have about a dozen preliminary plans currently in for review. We've reviewed about 24 already, and we continue to receive more, and we expect to receive more um, coming up here in May and June as many communities are coming up on their 6-month adjacent community review, sending that out for them. They'll also send their plan to us for review. If we get a lot, or I should say first that we have currently set a deadline for receiving draft 2040 plans for just staff to staff review of September 30th, understanding that we probably get a lot more 2040 official plans in the last quarter of this year. So we want to prioritize our time towards those deadlines. If we have amendments coming toward us and they are coming into us for review, those also have a statutorily required deadline for reviewing comment official action by this body, and we need to recognize that and make sure we're meeting those deadlines. So that may impact our ability to actually provide that 30-day review or 45-day review for local governments. We would like to prioritize that, but we also understand that this change could impact our ability to do that. So I have before you a proposal to amend that deadline, but also to advise communities that that this change in the comp plan amendment deadline does not change any due dates for surface water plans or for water supply plans. Those fall under different statute under law. They're not in the Land Planning Act in particular. That their existing 2030 plans remain in full force and effect until their local governmental unit adopts their 2040 comprehensive plan after authorization from the Metropolitan Council. There seems to be, in some cases, a misperception that after December 31st of 2018, that the 2030 plan no longer means anything, and that's not actually true. It still is their guiding document until the new document is adopted. We're just proposing that they can no longer amend that document. And that, excuse me, any amendments to 2030 comprehensive plans authorized by the council should be consistently reflected in local governmental units 2040 comprehensive plans that are then subsequently submitted to us for review. We don't want to review an amendment and then see a 2040 plan that doesn't show the same or something consistent. It puts us at odds with what we're supposed to be planning for. And then D, after December 31st of this year, any plan changes that would otherwise be proposed as amendments should just be simply incorporated into that community's 2040 comprehensive plan and be part of that process. We really want to get communities into getting those plans done, especially after the statutorily required deadline. And as you do recall, we do have an extension process for communities to request an extension to the 2018 deadline for their full comp plan. I will be giving you an update on that later this summer. The deadline for requesting that extension is at the end of this month. So I'll give you a sense of where that's at. But we will also be communicating with those communities in particular that request that deadline extension, that any changes to their 2030 plans should also be right there in their 2040 plans, so they're clear on that. And then finally, as I had mentioned, that council staff may revise the deadline for preliminary 2040 comprehensive plans depending on how the workload shapes out. That was a big mouthful, so if you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to take any that you may have. Thank you.
Any questions, members? Councilmember Elkins.
First response on seeing this was, are you sure you want to go all the way to the end of the year? But I'm guessing you're thinking that, as the construction season winds down, it's going to taper off anyway?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins, we look back at how the pattern of amendment submittal in past years, and we typically see a little bit of that tapering off over the last quarter of the year anyway. And we didn't want to get into a situation where now we have somebody say in September 15th saying, I've got one more amendment. And, if we have a warm fall and that extends it out further, the weather's a little more unpredictable these years than they have been in past years. So just to give that cushion.
I have one of my planning directors only half in jest. I tell him, well, it wouldn't kill you to just file your 2014 plan a little early. And he said, yeah, but if we do that, it'll get more scrutiny from your staff.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins, we give everyone equal scrutiny.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank staff for doing this. I got some calls from communities that are on track to get their plans done, doing everything they're supposed to do, but they're also bound by their own timelines.
Mhm.
If a developer asks for a change and submits the paperwork, they're on the clock for how long they have to
Right.
deal with that. And I hadn't even, I should have thought of that when we first
Right.
came up with our timeline, but it just didn't occur to me.
Mhm.
So when it was brought up, I was like, oh yeah, we can't just say, no, the applicant has to wait 6 months. The
Mhm.
world doesn't work that way. So I appreciate staff coming forward with this change and making it all the way through the end of the year, because cities can't dictate when somebody's going to come in with an application, but they do have to respond to it in a timely manner, which then obligates us to respond to it in a timely manner.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Wolf, we certainly have experienced that. We do know some communities did adopt moratorium on amendments during their planning process. I think in kind of hindsight being 2020, that in future decades, if we're all still here, that we would propose that that would be a best practice that cities should consider during their update process, especially in this kind of final draft phase of their comprehensive plan. That might be a good idea at any rate. But not everyone did that.
Councilmember Rahman.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to echo the compliments to staff. This is a good solution, given the concerns that were raised by Eden Prairie. It's one of those hot development markets, and they were concerned about the blackout on amendments. So tomorrow we're breaking ground on Elevate, which replaces Anchor Bank and Ruby Tuesdays with 220 units of housing, including 20% affordable. Those are the kind of development proposals that are coming quickly, and I think this is a solution that won't prohibit those developments from moving forward.
Thank you.
I would echo the same, that I think this is a good statement about the responsiveness of the council to a marketplace that is maybe more robust than what we expected in 2014. I think that's a good problem to have, and I want to just say thank you to Libby and Lisa in particular for helping manage the staff demands of this change, because there are some, and I appreciate that. So. Any other questions, or I'd entertain a motion?
I'll move the approval of this item.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Members, the next three items are reviews of master plan amendments for regional parks. And Emmett is going to offer some thoughts about the significance of these master plans and the work that we're doing and considering and approving them. So, welcome.
Thanks, Chair Commerce and members of the committee. As you may have noticed, at the direction of Chair Commerce, we're presenting regional parks business items here at Community Development Committee rather than having them on the consent agenda. Today, you'll see 3 park master plans and 1 park acquisition opportunity fund funding request. So before we get into these business items, we thought it would be helpful to just talk for 1 minute about why park master plans are important, why they matter. The first reason is really because state law requires them. They are required by state statute 473-313, and these master plans, they provide a really high-level look at what the park or trail will become. They set the administrative boundaries, sort of the land to be acquired, and they define future development and eligible activities. So it's really sort of a really basic function of defining what will become. The council's role in master plans is to, first of all, set the policy through the Regional Parks Policy Plan. Wendy just left, but what she always says is we establish the policy on which to measure all future park master plans. So and then when master plans come forward, we just make sure that they are consistent with those policies. When we bring grant requests forward for acquisitions, we make sure that the acquisitions and development projects are consistent with park master plans. When we're over at the legislature, the legislators really do pay attention to master planning because it gives them a degree of certainty that these projects are good to go, that they're shovel ready. The last thing I wanted to just say is that park master plans also required in the state statute is an estimate of development costs and acquisition costs for the proposed park or trail. They're not done on a regular schedule, and one of the reasons they're not done on a regular schedule is they're really expensive. They're staff intensive, um, and um, and that can be challenging for especially the smaller agencies. Um, with the passage of the 2040 Parks Policy Plan, um, we raised our expectations for public engagement. We really are expecting that the public engagement effort broadly engages residents of the area, as well as local governments and other organizations. So my final takeaway is just that master plan review is a really important function that the council provides, because it really will influence the future direction of our regional parks and trails, which I know you folks all love. So with that, I just wanted to set up Jake, who's now going to talk about two park master plans, unless there are any questions.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add one little piece to that. As part of our update of the 2040 Parks Policy Plan, one of the issues that has come up with master plans is the idea that maybe there might be a way to have like a minor update for things, you know, if you have just a small change to make rather than go through the full master planning process, which is very, very expensive and takes a long time. To be a little more flexible and not go I mean, kind of like we do with comp plan amendments. You have administrative ones and you have the full-blown ones, you know, so that we can respond to changes in needs without going through, you know, tens of thousands or $100,000 worth of planning in order to make a change to a plan.
Thanks, Councilmember Wolf.
Yeah, that point is well taken. I would also note that, first of all, thank you, Emmett, for that kind of overview. I think it's helpful context setting for not only these three items, but going forward. I would also add that I think, consistent with the conversation we had about the Regional Parks Policy Plan and the interest in really understanding the nature and then, more importantly, the outcomes of the public engagement process, that as we're considering these master plans going forward, I think it would be helpful to include some insights that have been developed or gathered through that process, because as we're accountable for the regional park system, I think it would be helpful to have some sense of kind of what the feedback is from users and from constituents who are engaged in that process. So,
Thank you, Chair Commerce. Good comment. We'll do that.
very good. Thank you, Emmett. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you, Chair Commerce. Thank you, committee members. You have before you a request from the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to approve the Bidet-Makaska Lake Harriet portion of the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park. And looking at the parks system map, I'm sure you're all aware of where Bidet-Makaska and Lake Harriet are, but they're part of the larger Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park, located in the southwest portion of the city of Minneapolis. They are part of, as I say, the larger park system, which is 1,555 total acres associated with Lake Harriet and Bidet-Makaska, as well as Lake of the Isles, Dean Parkway, Cedar Lake, and Browning Lake. And the boundaries of the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park has not changed since in the last half century, and no additional acquisitions are intended at this time. The plan addresses these two lakes specifically, as the community thinks of them as one park, and other master plans may come before you for the rest of the Chain of Lakes Regional Park. The plan itself has 5 overarching topic areas and 9 geographic focus areas, 6 at Bidet-Makaska and 3 at Lake Harriet. Included in the overarching topic areas are recommendations regarding water quality and stormwater management, shoreline erosion, native and invasive species, improvements to access for all and circulation and safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, and autos. There's also a big focus on expanded interpretation of the historic and cultural environment, as well as the natural environment, and enhanced recreation activities that are responsive to the needs of today's users, including for winter recreation. And the plan has a very strong focus on equity, including a direction to use an equity lens in future planning processes, based on training that the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board uses and will implement during those processes. The estimated implementation costs for the project are just over the total development cost is over $125 million, plus which includes a contingency for design and engineering. The Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board happens to update its capital improvement plan on an annual basis, so there's some high priority projects have been identified that focus mostly on trail and access improvements and site amenities that recognize the historical Dakota presence in the area. Both of those initiatives were considered by the advisory committee to the master plan as being short-term priority projects. So focusing on them aligns with the community engagement completed for the master plan. That's approximately $2.4 million. The subset for the 2-year plan that they have in place now, they'll focus on those two at first. And of course, approval of this master plan does not commit the council to any funding at this time. The acquisition and development costs based on this master plan may be awarded through the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund, Regional Parks Capital Improvement Program, Parks and Trails Legacy Fund, and council action is required to approve any of those requests. So the proposed findings for the master plan today is that it is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, consistent with Planning Strategy 1 and other council policies. And since it will require investments in non-recreational public facilities, preliminary development plans will be sent to MCES for review. So with that, the proposed action is that you approve the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes, Bedeh-Makaska Lake Harriet Master Plan. And I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Councilmember Dorfman.
Thank you. So there's been lots of work from the communities planning this whole area, partly because of all the traffic in the area, and partly because of its the importance of its connection to the Westlake Southwest LRT transit station as well. So those years of studies from an engineering masterclass at the U, looking at that whole area and access to some of the city planning, obviously the park board led efforts, does it all get rolled into this master plan?
Through the chair, Commissioner Dorfman, I think the short answer to that is yes. It's a very robust plan that has a significant number of appendices attached to it that are available through the Park Board's website that identify all of the engagement that was done, all of the engineering studies that have been done. And this particular master plan addresses the recreation opportunities specifically, and how to make those more easily accessible and more broadly interesting to the population that takes advantage of that park. Their engagement activities engaged not just the communities around Bedeh-Makaska and Harriet. They had wide representation from the entire city, which is why their community advisory council was ultimately appointed in order to have broad representation from the whole city. And part of what they did was take stock of the name issue, and then make that the very first thing. They think when Adam Arvidsson was at the MPOS committee meeting, he said that putting the name Bedeh-Makaska on all the signs, they think of it as the very first implementation of all the work that went in behind this plan. For other contexts, I might defer to Mr. Mullen.
Thank you. I know there was lots of discussion about how you would get from the southwest for a pedestrian or a bicyclist, how you would get safely from the Westlake station to the lake, because it's not all that easy to do. And so, yeah, I'm curious of their recommendations as part of this master plan regarding that. But I'll talk to the park board and the city about that.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Oh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, the entire plan is available online on the Park Board's website if you want to get into the nitty-gritty on it. But it did include looking at the connections to surrounding areas in
Yeah, I
Lake
would
Street
expect
and how
so.
all of that
Sure.
works together. In fact, they have a spot where like the land goes over Lake Street in the plan. Funding for that is a whole nother issue.
Right.
But with the discussion at MPOSC, the MPOSC members were very, very supportive of all of this and impressed with the depth of the work that had gone on. And there was actually discussions because the other parts of the chain of lakes have not had their plans updated in a very long time. And apparently, they had tried in the past to make those updates and it didn't go so well. But now that they've kind of worked through these two lakes, they feel a little better at tackling the rest of them. So hopefully the rest of it will get updated soon as well.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to move the item.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion to the item and recommendations? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve Master Plan Amendment in Anoka County. We're doing a large triangular tour here.
Another chain of lakes.
Indeed. Thank you, Chair Commerce. Committee members, you have before you a request from the Anoka County Parks and Recreation Board to approve the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve Master Plan Amendment. And that park, another chain of lakes, is located in the southeast corner of Anoka County and is located in the cities of Centerville, Lino Lakes, and Columbus. The 5,300-acre park reserve is one of the largest in the 7-county metropolitan area and contains some of the most significant wildlife habitat and water resources in the region. It's also rich in cultural resources with several known significant archaeological sites within its boundary. It offers a very wide variety of amenities. As I told MPOSC, I'm really excited to visit this now that I know there are so many things there. Included the Wargo Nature Center, Chamonix Golf Course, Rice Creek Campground, and Centerville Lake Beach. The park reserve also connects to the central Anoka County and Bunker Chain of Lakes regional trails. The original master plan was developed in 1975. It was revised in 1999, and in 2003, 12, and 13, the master plan was amended to adjust the boundaries of the park reserve to what it exists today. There's a significant development concept piece in this master plan amendment. The county proposes to include all of the projects outlined in the Wargo Nature Center master plan from March 2015 into the park's overall master plan. And those projects include additions and improvements to interpretive elements on the grounds, improvements to the Nature Center building, additional programming around essential experiences like access to water, birding, and tree houses, and enhancing the play area. And in case you're curious what they mean by tree houses, the image in the upper right-hand corner as you look at the screen is of one of those so-called tree houses attached to the Wargo Nature Center area. And the development concept for the park as a whole include improving the Peltier Lake fishing access, adding some alternative camping accommodations to the campground, the makeup of which was informed by their engagement process, a great deal of stormwater management improvements to address drainage issues within the campground, and a self-service canoe kayak rental program with an additional access point to the campground. They're also looking at adding an interpretive area for cultural resources, an additional fishing access or pier on Centerville Lake, and additional multi-use trails and connections to local neighborhoods. They're also looking at continuing improving maintenance facilities in the park to optimize their operations. The estimated implementation costs for this master plan are approximately $10.7 million, which includes $7 million in improvements at the Wargo Nature Center and nearly $2 million in maintenance facility improvements and general park improvements, such as digital monitors to inform people of going to the park. Again, the funding requests are not part of this request. And given that the proposed master plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan and consistent with Planning Strategy 1 and other council policies, staff recommends that you approve the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve Master Plan Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Members, it's your pleasure. Okay, it's been moved. It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion to the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is 2018-114, Lake Billsby Regional Park Master Plan in southernmost Dakota County. Raya Smiley. Afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. I'm here to present the Lake Billsby Regional Park Master Plan from Dakota County. As you can see on the Regional Park System Plan map, Lake Billsby Regional Park is located on the southern part of Dakota County and is adjacent to Lake Billsby, which is about 1,300 acres of reservoir of the Cannon River. The park itself was established in 1970. It is about 620 acres along the north side of Lake Billsby and the Cannon River. It is generally divided in two parts of East Park and West Park. So along the presentation, you'll see me talk about East Park and West Park separately. The eastern portion is about 254 acres that contains recreation. And as you can see on this map, there's a part on the southern, bottom of that picture that says Goodhue County Billsby Park. There's a part of this park that is in Goodhue County. They also have this Billsby Park. So the master plan was developed in coordination with Goodhue County for community engagement and development of the master plan. The west side is about 366 acres, that much of it is undeveloped. Sorry. So of that 620 acres, 455 of it are withholdings and are privately owned within the official park boundary. The total estimated market value of all of these inholdings, current and new, is about $3.7 million. That reflects the cost of the entire parcel, even if in some cases there's only a portion of the parcel that's being acquired. The plan identifies several boundary adjustments that you can see in this map. It also includes some removal, which is about 14.9 acres, and a little over 94 acres of additional withholding. So that adds up to just over 79 acres of net gain for the boundary of this park. The development concept for Lake Billsby Regional Park is mostly focused on improvements that are prioritized in a 10-year plan and also a long-term plan. The long-term plan goes beyond 10 years and is basically imagining the park as at its full capacity when it's fully developed. I am going to talk about the near term within the 10 years priority plans. The 10-year priorities that are, I'll show the graphics after this. They show improvements that are reasonably expected to be done in during the life of this master plan before it has to get updated again. The long-term concept for the east side of the Lake Billsby Park includes about 140 acres of developed parkland and some major improvements. So this is the 10-year development concept for the East Billsby or East Park, which is more detailed by use and is also showing improvements to the park that includes splash pads, volleyball courts, a lot of generally recreational activities that are being promoted on this side. The Lake Billsby Regional Park Natural Resource Master Plan was developed at the same time that this master plan was developed, and it includes a lot of detailed description of natural resources that are currently within the boundary of the park and are to be preserved. In the next 10 years, the county will focus mostly on restoration along the shoreline, Echo Channel, and the Dry Oak Savanna in the north. So now this is a 10-year development concept plan for the West Park, and as I mentioned, the West Park is less developed. So a lot of the improvements in the next 10 years will include park signage, parking areas, picnic areas, and amenities that currently are not there. The west side most of the areas within the west side are in agricultural use right now, and the county intends for this section to remain sort of undeveloped, and for the east to be the more recreational developed part of it. The primary activities for the West Park are prairie restoration of the agricultural areas, channel restoration, and removal of invasive species. Move along a little faster. The 10-year estimate for the East Billsby Park is just below $9 million, and for West Billsby is a little above $2 million, and that adds up to about a total of $11 million. The county estimates that the long-term plan, that's the one that goes beyond the 10 years, is $19 million for East Billsby and about $4 million for West Billsby. So that's the $23 million that you see over there. That all of these totals include 10% contingency, 20% engineering and design, and they all reflect the 2017 pricing. So the proposed findings of this plan is that it is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, and it is also consistent with the Planning Strategy 1 and other council policies. So given that, the action before you is that to approve the Lake Billsby Regional Park Master Plan, approve the master plan boundary adjustments to reflect the removal of the 3 parcels and addition of 4 parcels, as you saw in the 2 figures, and then require that Dakota County will submit estimated land acquisition costs because they were not quantified in detail in the master plan whenever the time comes. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, members? I have one question. You mentioned in the background that the new master plan evaluates visitor services offerings with an eye to meeting future needs, and I feel like that's a theme that at least I hear about, not just about the regional park system, but also about local parks. Is we're sort of needing to pivot what's available to meet current and anticipated future needs, people wanting accommodations for larger family gatherings, things like that. I just wondered, could you give us some examples of how this plan anticipates that, or just some feedback about that part of your report?
Sure. So in terms of the visitor surveys, the county, Dakota County, and with collaboration with Goodhue County, they currently did a lot of online questionnaires and other kinds of outreach to potential park users, and by potential I mean people who live in the area. And I think from what I remember from the report, it's over 200 responses, which for this area is a lot of responses that they received. At this point, the park is not being used much, so the being able to accommodate future need includes the new signage and the activities that currently don't exist, like the splash pads and volleyball courts, and accommodating more parking. They mention in many places that there isn't enough parking for the visitors to come and visit the park. Did that answer your question? Sorry.
That's helpful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the issues that came up when they did their outreach was just letting people know that the park exists, which I knew it existed. It's in my district,
right?
But I didn't even know the west part was there because, I mean, it's land that doesn't have anything on it right now. And I hadn't seen the master plan, so I thought that the east park was the whole park. So yeah, a lot of it is educating people what's available, making it actually accessible, because right now you can't really access anything on the west side of the park. So it'll create opportunities that aren't currently there, but also let people know that those opportunities are there for kayaking and all of that sort of stuff on the Cannon River. Right. It's another place to access the Cannon River. And camping, there's a lot of expansion that will happen with the campgrounds, which is becoming a very popular activity in our regional parks, but people didn't know that this was even there.
Yeah, that's great. Other questions? Entertain a motion otherwise, members?
I would move approval, Mr. Chair.
Okay, it's been moved
Second.
and seconded. Is there discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is 2018-115 Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund Grant for West Mississippi River Regional Trail in the Three Rivers Park District. Deb Johnson, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. This afternoon we have a request from Three Rivers Park District to buy 2 pieces of property that are abutting the Mississippi River on the south shore. This is for the West Mississippi Regional Trail, which you might remember came before you at your last meeting for approval of its master plan. The trail, if you look on the left side of your screen at that top red dot, the property is almost immediately beneath that within the pink line of the new trail. And if you look on the right side of your screen, the arrow points directly to where the property is located. You can see from this aerial photo that there are 2 parcels, both owned by the same seller. One of them is approximately 4 acres, the other is approximately 7, for a total of 11. You can see that the property is characterized by about half of it being flat. Some of it has been ag land. The rest of it is fairly well wooded and is also characterized by some deep ravines that lead right down to the river. Has some really nice views from the property. You can see across the river, and you can see here a little bit of what the ravines look like as well. In this request, Three Rivers is asking for a total of up to $431,147. Of that, I beg your pardon, of that, the bulk of the state money would come from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, about $259,000 for that. Council bonds would match that with just over $172,000. The grant would not exceed then $431,147. Three Rivers would cover 25% of the grant cost, or $143,715. They have asked for future reimbursement consideration, and excuse me, I can't talk today. I'm good, Councilmember Wolf.
Okay.
I'm good. Thank you. I have a cold that will not go away. The future reimbursement consideration allows Three Rivers to request reimbursement of that amount from their share of a future capital improvement program. It doesn't increase their share or decrease anybody else's share. You just get to request it in the future. The rationale for this is the request meets the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan. The appraisal has been submitted to the LCCMR, Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources, and we have amended our existing fiscal year 2015 work plan. I can't read that slide from here. It's also consistent with the West Mississippi Regional Trail Master Plan. Therefore, these are always long, my apologies. We recommend that you approve a grant for up to $431,147 to Three Rivers Park District to acquire this property, which is at 15590 Dayton River Road in the city of Dayton, for the West Mississippi River Regional Trail. 2, to authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. 3, consider reimbursing Three Rivers Park District for up to $143,716 from its share of a future Regional Parks Capital Improvement Program for costs associated with the Dahlheimer acquisition, and to inform Three Rivers Park District, as we always do, that the council does not under any circumstances represent or guarantee that future reimbursement will be granted, and that expenditure of local funds never entitles a park agency to reimbursement. I might note, and my apologies, I see 2 typos in here. On page 2 of the item, it says that the local match would be 143,715. It's actually 716. And it also says that the West Mississippi Regional Trail is in northwest Hennepin County, and it is in fact in northeast Hennepin County. My apologies. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments, members? Councilmember Wolf?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to comment with park acquisition money. We've got two separate funds. One is from Legacy and one is from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. The Legacy money we've been continually running short on because it has the fewest restrictions on what it can be used to acquire. The Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, which we're using here, can only be used for high quality natural resources. And in this case, the picture showed that there were buildings on the site. There are no buildings there anymore. They've been removed. But this is high quality land on the river with the ravines and the wooded areas and everything. So we're getting to use the money that we have a bunch of because we haven't had very many high quality properties becoming available. So this is a good one because it's not putting us in the hole money-wise.
Thank you for that. That's helpful.
And I would move approval.
Okay, it's been moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Is there discussion to the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Wolf, for your assistance.
Next item is 2018-116, City of Eagan Costco Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Patrick Boylan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair, council members. Okay. City of Eagan applied for a comprehensive plan amendment. This background is in the northern part of Dakota County. The site itself is adjacent to Interstate 35E and just south of Interstate 494. Shows the regional systems nearby. The City of Eagan is a suburban community. Great access for this particular site for a Costco, which is a members-only retail, and they will have some automotive uses and a liquor store there as well. This was only shot about 3 weeks ago. I threw that in there because it's a nice site. And one of the pieces in my staff report calls out regionally significant ecological area. It is a partially wooded, partially grassland site. I did not walk it because I was not wearing boots, but there is some significant village there as well. Subject site, they're looking to go from an office environment to a retail environment. Comp plan is required here. One of the things I'll talk about later, and this is also my report, is some forecast information about that particular piece as well. Back really quick, this is the site, and the proposed amendment is to allow this particular use for Costco. So the pieces that you need to know is that Thrive does support redevelopment and beautification of land, and it also supports natural resource conservation. And the amendment is consistent with Thrive, except for natural resource protection policy and surface water management. The amendment will change forecast as well, and going from that office designation to the commercial entity that is Costco will be significant fewer employees at that particular site. So forecast changed as follows, mostly just in affecting employment for the years 2020, 2030, and 2040. This is a combination of discussion between local city staff and our research staff, and this is what staff here recommends. Going back to the comments I made a moment ago, and that are also detailed in the staff report, is the natural resource and surface water management. The amendment is inconsistent with the council's policy for natural resources, and is inconsistent with the policies for surface water management. Natural resources is considered our database that we have put together. It is inconsistent in the sense that this is a significant regionally significant ecological area. Thrive does talk about protecting those areas, but there's more mechanisms in place to do anything other than comment on. So we have this process. City's database they're using from NDOT, or sorry, from DNR, shows that the significant ecological area doesn't exist on the site. The database that we use for this does show that it is. That particular part of the city, this is the last remaining lot, and that wooded, snowy, grassy area I showed is surrounded by significant office industrial uses. So the amendment conforms to regional system plans. Oh, let me go back. Sorry. So the consistency issue that I raised with Service Water Management staff. This is they had a public hearing to amend their comp plan. They don't have a final site plan yet for the city, or at least one that's been through their system. Our comment is always to cities is to gather as much stormwater management as we can. They did not have specifics for volumetric issues or rate control, where it's going to store. Site plan shows that majority of the site will be building and significantly larger parking lot. Conversation with city staff is that there will be, as per Egan's rules and policies, that they'll be discharged to surrounding wetlands and county ditches, and there's a ditch associated with MnDOT as well. That's fine. I understand that that's what they want to do. Significant piece for us is what is going to happen to stormwater once it hits the site before it gets to those conveyances, before it gets to those wetlands. We were assured in discussion with city staff and then with the developers that they would prepare information for us and data for us to gather that. So while we feel confident in working with the staff, it is considered inconsistent because we want them to be first. Staff report details that it does conform to regional system plans. That's consistent with council policies, with the exception of natural resources protection policy, and then there's stormwater, surface water management policy. That it's compatible with the plans of adjacent affected jurisdictions. The action in front of you for the council would be to adopt a review record, and then to revise city employment forecast to show the reductions for 2020, 2030, 2040, and that there's comments about housing, natural resources, surface water management. So before the housing comment is more just as a heads up, comp plan coming. You're in the middle of doing your 2040 plan. There's time to reach out to council staff. So did reach out to city staff. They were unfortunately not available to attend today. I'm available for any questions you have.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there questions? I appreciate that you've highlighted these issues of inconsistency. I have one question about, it seems to me like the comp plan amendment and the site plan review, there's less cohesion between those two things than I would have expected, and maybe that's just my own perception that there would be more cohesion, but do we have a sense of the time frame when a site plan would become clearer, and also what impacts that might have on the stormwater issues that you've raised?
Chair Commerce and council members, so there's always that tension, and I remember well when I worked at the local level of developer has, financing this and holding funds and paying service costs of those funds. Doesn't really want to move forward with final engineering, which is expensive, not to mention until they have surety. Certainly their lenders will require that comp plan, that the future guiding is consistent. So no, they haven't done that. It's a little backwards, but from a development perspective or from a business perspective, it does make sense. Spend money until they know. So this won't be the first time that I've been in. I will continue to be in touch with city staff about what's going on. Can you share this with us? I'll confer with Jim Larson, our staff, about best practices. We've already shared best practices with them, and we're aware with that. It's just there'll be a little more follow-up for me on this one than normally, I think, because of that.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess from my standpoint, I'm not particularly worried about it. Egan's staff is certainly savvy in doing development, but when you look at this, because it's an amendment, had they waited until their update of their 2040 plan, it would have just been a color change on a big map. And it wouldn't be getting this sort of review. It's only because they have an end user that these comments are even coming up, because it wasn't a concern when it was going to be an office. And they could potentially do the same magnitude of development as an office as they're doing currently with a commercial development. So I don't have that concern because of the high level at what we're supposed to be reviewing these things. And I would move approval also.
Okay, it's been moved
Second.
and seconded. Is there discussion of the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Members, our last business item is 2018-117. It's to amend the guidelines for the housing policy performance scores, and this builds on the work of the Housing Performance Score Work Group. Tara Beard, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members. I'm anxiously awaiting for my PowerPoint to show up.
This is my non-one.
Now I'm anxiously wishing I brought a hard copy of my PowerPoint. Well, okay, I'll do my best. I'll wing it. So as you may or may not be aware, hopefully you are, one of the primary measures for housing that are put forward by the council around affordable housing is a housing performance score for every community that receives an allocation of affordable housing need or is a participant in the Livable Communities Act programs. Oh, thank you. Councilmember Elkins to the rescue. Apologies. And we use those scores to prioritize funding for communities in a couple of the Livable Communities Act programs, including Livable Communities Demonstration Account and Tax-Based Revitalization Account. We also use these scores in the Regional Solicitation for Transportation Funds process, and they account for 7% of the total score in that process. So how we calculate the scores is by using a methodology with a very lengthy name, Guidelines for Priority Funding for Affordable Housing Performance. I think that's it. And what we do is we collect data every year from Minnesota Housing and from counties, and then we send out a survey to local governments to look at what affordable housing efforts have been made, both in policies and programs and in the construction of new affordable housing. Including preservation. And then we sort of put that data through a sausage machine that uses a methodology to determine what effort a community has been making relative to other communities in furthering affordable housing. And then the scores are used as previously described. So in the guidelines, which are a part of the housing policy plan that was last adopted in 2015, there was a major revision to how the housing performance scores were calculated. And within that, there was a stipulation that every 2 years, those guidelines would be revisited and we would take a look at the methodology behind the calculation of the scores. So that has been happening since 2016, and 2018, of course, meant another review. So we formed a working advisory group to provide feedback, and that was comprised of staff from 5 cities, 2 counties, Minnesota Housing, Metro Cities, Housing Justice Center, and Minnesota Housing Partnership. We had 2 focused productive sessions and then a significant amount of continued discussion via email to talk about different aspects of the methodology that we may want to consider changing. And those issues that we debated and discussed were both raised by staff and by members of the work group, as well as a couple that were stipulated in the guidelines themselves. So the topics that we reviewed was the hold harmless provision that I will speak more about again in the future. Categories that after a few years of seeing how the new methodology played out had garnered few or no points for communities, and taking a look at the necessity of those questions, kind of doing a double check on categories that may double count, adding and changing categories for policies and practices that have become more common in the region. There's been a lot of policies that are in place today that weren't well known, or many not many adopted around the region 3 years ago. And then checking in on categories that add complexity without helping achieve parity. We really want the scores to allow all communities an opportunity to score well. And there's a lot of different types of tools and housing needs, and cities need flexibility in how they address that. But the tool itself, the survey we send to cities that we use to calculate the score, it's pretty complicated, it's pretty complex. And so we definitely want to look for opportunities to simplify the tool, especially if the criteria that we're looking at doesn't actually achieve that parity we're looking for. As a reminder, and there's no proposed changes to this structure, the housing performance scores total 100 points. 50 points of that come from new construction and preservation of affordable housing. 25 of those points come from characteristics of the existing housing stock, how much of that existing housing stock is affordable. And then 25 points come from housing programs and policies, and with a really renewed focus since the major change in 2015 on households served and actual impact of programs and policies versus policies that are simply on the books. So jumping into the proposed changes, as I mentioned, the guidelines specifically addressed in 2018 that we look at the hold harmless provision that was instated because of the drastic change to the methodology in 2015. We wanted to make sure that communities had some time to adjust and change to how the scores were being calculated, but there was a review. We took a look and we looked at the 2017 scores that had been calculated and looked at how many cities would have had a significant reduction in their score if the hold harmless provision weren't in place. And our analysis was that only 5 cities would have had a reduction of 10 or more points. That, and given that there have been 3 years to adjust to the new guidelines and adapt housing strategies accordingly, the group had consensus that we can eliminate the hold harmless provision at that time. And so that's in the proposal before you today. Additional changes include more pathways to points, and we had some really good discussion and analysis of the spread in those 50 points that are for either new construction or preservation of affordable housing. Oh, look, there's my presentation. Okay. Sorry. Has that been there for a long time? Sorry. Okay. Would you like this back, Councilmember Elkins?
We're good.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so when there was the major revisions to the guidelines in 2015, there was a change to the guidelines that, depending on how fast a community was growing and what its community designation was, there should be more incentive to preserve existing affordable housing versus more incentive to build new construction. And I think a big part of that decision then had to do with the fact that the conversation around naturally occurring affordable housing was really just picking up steam then. And I think there was a real desire to highlight how important that was and to really encourage communities with a lot of existing affordable housing to start looking at preservation strategies. But as we dug deeper, looking back at 3 years worth of scores and talked more about what the landscape is around preservation and new construction today, the group decided that there really is a lot of value in both strategies, and that the factors that go into deciding which strategy may work best for a community has a lot more significance than simply how much growth they can expect. For example, if you look at growth and existing population in Maple Grove compared to Eden Prairie, it's very similar. But Maple Grove has 0 existing affordable housing units to preserve. Eden Prairie has a lot and has lost some in the past couple years. So I think we recognize the complexity of the strategies for preservation and the strategies for new construction. And rather than kind of making a call about what that ratio should be for cities to focus on, we're proposing to revert to 25 points each of that 50, up to 25 points for preserving existing affordable housing and up to 25 points for new construction of affordable housing. However, we want to keep the rollover provision in place that was established, which says that if you meet all your points, exceed your points, say in new construction, a quarter of your preservation points that are in excess of that 25 points, I think I just gave everybody 50 points. The rollover provision allows you to address some of the points with an excess if you haven't met the requirements of the other type of affordability. up to 25%. And so we do propose to keep that. And that acknowledges that if a community isn't doing much preservation, while we think a balanced approach makes sense, if they're doing just tons of new construction affordable, there should be an opportunity to glean more than the 25 points available.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
Tara,
Councilmember
can you just
Dorfman.
clarify? So the old language said you could get 50 points for a combination or for any kind of, it recognized that both the need for preservation as well as new construction. So this one, so how is that a change in this?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, the total is still 50 points. Mm-hmm. And what we were doing in the last couple of years was telling communities that were growing faster that they should focus more on new construction. And so more than 25 of those points could come from new construction for those communities. For example, if a household forecast for a community was 10% or less of their existing households, the maximum points for new affordable housing out of the 50 was only 15. And the maximum points for preservation was 35. So we were, in essence, we were kind of making a call about whether a community should be focusing more on preservation or more on new construction. And what we're proposing today is to sort of take that judgment call out of our hands and leave it to cities to decide, and acknowledging that whether it's preservation or it's new construction, it's creating a unit that is now in an income restricted affordable place, and the importance of preservation and the intense need for preservation is very important. And so we're kind of giving those two equal share of those 50 points.
If you do all of one, Mr. Chairman, if you do all of one or all of the other, because both are needed, can you get 50 points or not under this?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, good question. You highlighted how poorly I explained that a minute ago. Yes, you can. So, for example, if you have built enough new units, well in excess of the 25 points, a quarter of that excess can be rolled over into your preservation points. So you would have to do more new construction to equal 1 point in preservation, but there is that ability.
Thank you.
Among our proposed changes included responding to trends and just acknowledging the changing landscape in housing policy. One of the criteria in the guidelines were that for credit for a mixed income development, there had to be a minimum of 20% of the units affordable. And that really followed a model that folks were familiar with when tax credit financing was the primary driver of mixed income deals. And that really had that kind of tended to have that 80-20 split. And at that point in time, we only had one community, only St. Louis Park at that point had a mixed income housing policy that addressed embedding affordable housing in market rate developments or developments that don't have tax credit financing. Now we have a lot of communities with that kind of a policy, and we're starting to see developments come in, and sometimes it's only 10% or 15%, or speaking to St. Louis Park, it's 18% of the units in a private market development are affordable. So under the existing guidelines, they would not receive any points for that. They would receive points for having the policy in the housing and programs section, but they wouldn't receive any points in the new and preserved construction category because it didn't meet that 20/80 threshold. Recognizing that more units are better, it's also really important to acknowledge that we're measuring a city's effort, and the effort of putting affordable units in a market rate development is pretty substantial and requires more of that local push than some of the more difficult complexity of a tax credit deal, which the burden can lay more on the developer in that sense. So we thought it really important to acknowledge that any property, any development that's mixed use, regardless of how it's financed or how much of the existing units are affordable, should receive some credit for that. We're also proposing to eliminate a portion.
Well, I'll ask it, Mr.
Councilmember Dorfman.
So even if it's 1%? Okay.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Dorfman. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I will say most cities with a mixed income policy, even embedded within private development, I don't know of any with a threshold that's that low.
No,
But the livable communities, there was a component of the criterion that measured a city's new affordable housing production as a share of their Livable Communities Act affordable housing goal. And we're proposing to suspend that for now for a couple of reasons. The Livable Communities Act goals were negotiated quite some time ago, pre-recession, and a lot of our forecasts, because of the recession, have been substantially changed. But those Livable Communities Act goals are still based on those forecasts. And so we're measuring production of units against communities that may have an artificially high or artificially low goal at this point in time. We are in the process of beginning the negotiation for Livable Communities Act goals for the 2021 to 2030 decade, and our next review of these guidelines will be in 2020. So I think it makes a lot of sense at that point in time to consider if adding a component of Livable Communities Act goal achievement should be a part of the scoring process. But at this time, I think it definitely adds an extra layer of complexity to the survey tool and is not necessarily getting us much, especially because any new units are still getting counted in that new construction piece, regardless of a goal. So those are the really substantive changes. You have the redlined and amended versions of the guidelines that have some additional clarity, changes for clarification. But regardless, our next steps will be to continue to collect data from Minnesota Housing and our counties, distribute the local survey to governments by the end of June, compile and score survey results using this adopted or amended changes to the guidelines, and then releasing 2018 housing performance scores in the fall. And that's all I had for you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that was in your report, but not in the PowerPoint, was the points that go for county levies for affordable housing, because you said it's double counted. But as I'm looking at the red line version of this whole thing, it was 3 points for the city's local expenditure and 3 points for the county's levy, total of 6 points. When you look at the points for policies, you could get 4 points per policy, which totals up to a lot more points than actually spending money. And I have concerns about that. That seems to be going in the wrong direction, because at least in Dakota County, many of the communities are not able to do mixed income policies because there isn't the developer interest in multifamily housing strong enough to even support something like that if a city was inclined. So they're missing out on those points, but now they're not getting very many points for actually spending the money. And I see that as being sort of unfair. We should be giving more points than that for actually spending money, because Dakota County does max out its affordable housing levy on behalf of all of the cities in the county, and some other counties don't. I would like to see some more points to recognize that.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Wolf, I think that there's definitely room for a conversation about how many points, but I think that the increase in points should be in one or the other of the measures, because there were two measures giving points for that county levy piece. And there is a tension between us really trying to identify what a city is proactively doing versus what a city, I mean, to some extent, it is up to the CDA whether or not to levy the city and how much to levy the city. And they absolutely get credit for it. We take that number and we include that in what the city's contribution toward their affordable and life cycle housing amount is. And that's the place where we're still proposing to capture that. And again, if there was a desire amongst the council to increase the value there, I think that would, that's certainly a discussion worth having, but having two separate places for that to be considered kind of adds to something that's already kind of complicated for folks to get their arms around, which is this county levy piece and how it contributes to city role in affordable housing. We do have a lot of, during the comprehensive plan process, we're really recognizing how much cities struggle with understanding what their role is versus the county CDA or HRA. And so since cities are the ones applying for the Livable Communities Act programs, I think we were trying to focus on what cities do with their money versus what they necessarily contribute. But we certainly want to give some points, and that's why it's still in there.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Dorfman.
One last question. So in the 2 meetings that you had, were there any contentious issues amongst the participants?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, that's a good question. I'm trying to think. I do remember there was some good conversation. This was actually in the email discussion at the end about new state legislation clarifying and enabling the creation of affordable housing trusts, trust funds, and adding that to the list of policies that could create could contribute toward points. And I think a lot of folks felt like that was definitely something to keep our eye on, but that the legislation itself is probably not enough to incentivize cities that don't already have a trust fund to create one, and that there is a push to add a state match to the creation of an affordable housing trust fund, and that could certainly make that a more viable policy option, and then it might raise to that level of use and knowledge that it would be worth calling out specifically. Now, if a community wanted to add in the optional narrative that they have an affordable housing trust fund, we can absolutely still consider that as a reason to give some additional points.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wolf.
So I just wanted to go back to what I said,
Please.
because I do think that we should increase the points. Getting 4 points for a policy and 3 points for maxing out your levy on affordable housing just doesn't fit right for me. So I don't know necessarily what the right number is. Even 6 seems a little low if you're getting 4 just to have a policy. But is anybody else here amenable to that, or?
I just, it relates to the
Councilmember Elkins.
I had was, I'm still, I read this, I kind of understand, but it doesn't look like it's that much of a change, but the results I see from my own cities don't make sense to me quite frequently. And so I'm wondering about, how is this, who actually does the scoring?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins.
Because my impression is that probably some of my cities are just much better at filling out the application than others.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins, you're absolutely right that the city's degree of engagement in their survey can 100% impact their score, and we try to make it as consistent as possible by pre-populating all the data we can get our hands on. Yep. But we are a little bit at the mercy of what a city will share with us, and we are always available. We get plenty of calls, especially as it got more complicated of a tool, of cities asking, how do I fill this out? What do you mean by this? And so we're always available to do that. When the surveys actually come in, you will be thrilled to know that I do not create the scores out of the survey, but I have help with my colleagues in the research department that are far more adept at database systems and Excel to sort of put the data we have and use it in the way described to develop the scores.
So to tie that to Wendy's question, I've got cities who are scoring so high that they couldn't possibly be scoring that high unless they were getting lots of points for adopting policies that aren't actually producing any results.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins, there is one change I didn't talk about that I think will address that somewhat. I didn't talk about it because it's not really a substantive change in the text or what we're counting, but how it's counted. Yep. So in the housing programs and policy section, there are a handful of criterion that are basically looking at efforts to address affordable home ownership, foreclosure prevention, down payment assistance, rehab loans, et cetera. And a lot of the resources available to cities are not embedded within their own budgets and departments, but they still, to Councilmember Wolf's point perhaps, deserve some credit for furthering those programs, for referring folks to those programs, for working with the agencies that do deploy those programs. And so, but what we were doing previously was awarding 3 points baseline if any of those programs were in fact being used. and then 0.1 points for every household that received that benefit. And we are proposing to remove the 3 points baseline that program exists, but add 0.2, so double the amount of points per household that is served under any of these affordable homeownership proposals. So I think that is a real thing that, we're continuously kind of measuring how the guidelines end up looking in terms of the score and whether or not we are measuring impact versus adopted policy.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And there too, if you do it that way, you're biasing it towards larger communities because they have more people that can access those programs. If you're Elko Newmarket and you only have a few thousand people, even if everybody in town was using that program, you can never get as many points as Minneapolis or St. Paul could get because they're so much larger. So going to a purely per unit isn't necessarily the best. I think the other way was better, actually.
Members, I wonder, I suspect there might be at least two of you who would be interested in some kind of work session to get into the next level of detail on this particular topic.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to dissect a couple of the scoring sheets for a couple of my cities.
I thought the word dissect might come up.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I would suggest, members, then, is perhaps what we do is we lay this on the table for now, and we can conduct kind of a review session of some kind. Tara can lead us through maybe some consideration of the more nitty-gritty of the scoring, and then we can have a discussion about what, if any, impact that might have on the text we'd like to consider and bring back to the committee.
Are you looking for a motion? Because I think that's a fantastic idea.
Okay. I'm not sure we need a motion for that. I suppose we do to...
Doesn't hurt.
Future agenda
Sure.
item.
I would entertain a motion to undertake that step.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move to table this item pending a work session of whoever on the committee wants to be part of it to look deeper.
Okay. There's a second. All those in favor then, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you. And just in terms of time frame for that, I think we'd like to move fairly quickly in that direction. So we'll be in touch to schedule something. Thank you, Tara. So that concludes our business agenda, members. We have two information items. First is an update on the Metro HRA Community Choice Program from Jennifer Keogh, Tammy Prigge, and Ryan Leafheit. Welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. For the record, my name is Jennifer Keogh, and I am the manager of the Metro HRA. And I am very excited to be here this afternoon to present with my colleague, Making Life Better for Housing Choice Voucher Families. Our presentation today is going to touch on the work that we are doing with our mobility counseling program. I'm going to give you some updates on the Housing Choice Voucher outreach efforts, and then give you a little information about initiatives that we've been doing with our council-owned units. With me today is Tammy Prigge, our HRA Assistant Manager. Tammy is responsible for our day-to-day oversight of the mobility counseling program. And Ryan Leifheit is our Senior Outreach Coordinator. She's working directly with the families on our program. That's my clicker. All right, so background and timeline. Back in 2014, you as the council set a bold vision through Thrive, an equity goal, to expand housing options for all residents, whatever their choice may be. You provided us with the funds to start a mobility counseling program. So I want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for investing in our program and helping us really work with families holistically to ensure that they have choice and opportunity. In 2015, we launched our mobility counseling program, Community Choice. I'm going to give you some information and an overview on that in the next slide. In 2016, We expanded our efforts and some lessons learned in promoting resident success through the usage of prevention and harm reduction strategies in our council-owned units. And in 2017, we took it a step further and hired an outreach coordinator to serve as a program ombudsman and assist families in placing their vouchers in a very tight rental market. So my purpose is I'm going to spend just a bit of time giving you an update on these initiatives, and then I'm going to hand over the mic in just a minute to my colleagues. So our mobility counseling program, Community Choice. I know that I presented to you before about our program, so I'm just going to give you a review. Community Choice, we are focusing on meeting families where they are. We're using holistic approaches to serving our families. We're going above beyond providing just a rental subsidy, and we're focusing on what our families need to thrive. Through Community Choice, families have the opportunity to place their vouchers in an area of opportunity, what we consider an area of low poverty and access to high-performing schools. Elements of the program, participants, we do recruitment through participant and landlords. We conduct pre-move counseling with families, finding out what their needs are and setting goals. We're doing family assessments to determine what they need to be successful. And during those pre-counseling move status, families attend tenant education and financial literacy classes. Our tenant education is focusing on housekeeping, being a good neighbor, communication skills, and how to understand a lease. In financial literacy, we're focusing on budgeting and savings, credit repair, and wealth building. We offer housing search assistance and help families navigate the rental market and application process. In addition, all of our outreach staff are trained in housing quality standards and are able to evaluate units and let owners know ahead of time what might be needed for repairs before move-in. In fact, we have streamlined our inspections process to have our outreach staff complete the inspections rather go through scheduling. We have found that this strategy has been beneficial for the overall end user experience for the owner. And I'm excited for you to hear more about this later on in our presentation. A few years ago, Family Housing Fund conducted a focus group of landlords. It was a group of participating landlords, landlords that hadn't participated in the voucher program, and then a few landlords that had participated and then chose not to take vouchers. What they heard loud and clear and what we took out of that were a couple of things. Number one is inspections was frustrating. We have 10 housing authorities in the Twin Cities with property owners all over the Twin Cities. So the inspection process was frustrating for them. And they also wanted someone that they could partner with. They wanted someone that if something was happening with the family that they could call. So they were saying, we would rather work with a small program like GRH, Group Residential Housing, than the voucher program. As you all know, our rental market is tough. Vacancy rates are low. Families with barriers find it very difficult to place their vouchers. Landlords don't have to work with us, and oftentimes are going to choose to rent with somebody without a voucher. In 2017, we wanted to put some of our time and attention towards helping increase our voucher utilization and help families that were struggling to place their vouchers. We hired a full-time outreach coordinator, Abdiaziz Ibrahim. He happens to be on family leave, so wasn't able to be with us today. But we hired him to serve in this capacity. He's focusing on things like ensuring good relationships with our owners. He's doing a ton of outreach. He's hitting the pavement hard, trying to recruit landlords that want to work with the Housing Choice Voucher program. And he's working on retention. So serving as that program ombudsman, he's that one phone call away. So if landlords want to discuss an issue with their family, he's able to intervene, and then that helps us with retention of those landlords. Through his work, he's helping us expand our tenant education and financial literacy classes to more program participants. So where tenant education, financial literacy has been housed just in mobility counseling, we're able to expand our reach now to all of our voucher participants. He's working with families struggling to place their voucher. He's running background checks, not in the effort to screen families out, but to really look at what kind of barriers are these families having and then addressing them, looking at credit repair, going to expungement hearings, and finding resources so they can pay off their debt. The nice thing is if we're using that background check, we're able to then negotiate with certain landlords and say, here, we've already done the background check. We're able to negotiate those application fees as well. Tammy's going to give you in a bit some more statistics about our voucher placement. Lastly, I want to talk about prevention strategies that we've been using in our family affordable housing program. We're doing that to stabilize and promote resident success in the units the council owns. Our goal through all of this has been to keep families housed and to promote resident success and, if possible, avoid eviction. We all know in the U.S. we have an eviction epidemic on our hands. If you haven't read the book Evicted by Matthew Desmond, I highly recommend. According to Desmond, in Minnesota, 9.51 evictions are filed each day. We truly believe that we're in the business of housing people, and if we can work with families to keep them housed, we will. We changed our approach in how we've been working with families in the council-owned units. We started with how we work with them in housekeeping and yard inspections. We engaged the family in the process, showed them what was needed to comply. Sometimes it's just a matter of distinguishing a weed from a flower. In the cases of families that were not complying with housekeeping inspections, we created action plans that allowed families to buy in to the process so that compliance was a lot easier. We created checklists for housekeeping that's given at every move-in, and families are able to use that in maintaining their home. Monthly rent collection and delinquencies is one of the primary duties of a property owner. In 2016, our average monthly rent delinquency was $15,000. Currently, it's sitting at about $1,500 by mid-month. This reduction was because of a big initiative we worked with our property management company on. We were able to set up the use of online rent collection payments. 60% of our families signed up to use this. We also implemented financial literacy strategies with our families. So at the first onset of delinquency, a phone call was made. The second onset in a row, another phone call was made to find out what was going on. And by the third, we were working through budgeting and financial literacy classes with our families. And what this did is that it reduced the number of unlawful detainers or evictions filed. In fact, we only filed one eviction in 24 months for non-payment of rent because of these successful strategies. As you can tell, I'm truly proud of the work that we're doing in the HRA. These programs are essential, and we know that our families, given the tools and the support, will succeed. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Tammy to talk about the marketing and outreach successes for the Community Choice Voucher and the Housing Choice Voucher program.
Chair, council members. Again, my name's Tammy Prigge. I'm Assistant Manager with the HRA. So when you talk about vacancy rates, they're low, and so we need landlords to participate with the Housing Choice Voucher program. So what we came up with is some marketing strategies for our owners to work with us through the Community Choice program. What we wanted to do is create smart renters. So when Jennifer's talking about our financial literacy and our tenant education programs, we decided that they should go through all this as part of the program, which has made us, our renters, smart renters. We also help and guarantee owners with damage and security deposits. This is also a benefit because, as you know, owners have to go through, maybe they're waiting for that tenant to get emergency assistance. Emergency assistance takes quite a long time, and it's kind of a process. So now we can come in and help those families with paying their damage and security deposits. We also have a risk pool. This money is used in case of a family creating more damages than maybe just their damage deposit. This is just more upfront to help an owner work with us. Since the inception, we have not had to use this money at all, but it's just a huge selling point in showing that we're behind our families, that we can make them successful. Another point, we also can go out there and work with the families and be mediators. If there's any problems that we see going forward. We can also make those referrals out to support services for our families to make sure that they're connected in their communities in which they live so they can be successful. We also, of course, have our guaranteed rent month. The senior outreach coordinators do regular home visits. They are in those units quarterly so that they can see what's going on in the unit, and if they have to do any mediation, they can start right away and maybe resolve the issues before it becomes a bigger problem. Again, Jennifer talked about our streamlined inspections, and that's just because they have that relationship with those owners. They can make those inspections scheduler with on the owner's time and not so much waiting for an inspector to come out for a whole day. Outreach. So what are we doing in outreach? We are trying to get in front of owners to tell them about our program. We talk with owners every day, on the phone, through email, or getting in front of them right in person. We're making those connections with these owners. We also have a database of them so that we are creating one message, one uniform message, so they're getting the same message from all of us. We attended the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association both conferences in the fall and this one in the spring. In last fall, we had a booth of DSEs was there with the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. And then this spring, we presented St. Paul PHA and also with Minneapolis Public Housing Authority about the voucher program and the benefits that is for owners to take and be a part of it. We also have chosen strategically a group of landlords from large and small portfolios to compromise our land to come up with our landlord focus group. And these are invaluable feedback for us in how we're doing with the program and how we can make it better. These outreach efforts have made a difference in our housing choice voucher participants, and I would just like to give you a story. So we had a participant who was a 69-year-old veteran who could not find housing. He had a mutual term of lease, so there wasn't anything that the landlord was saying against him that he had any lease violations. They just wanted him out of that unit, mutual lease term. That man was out searching for housing. By the time at the end of his lease term, he could not find any or secure new housing, and he was close to being homeless. He moved in with his son temporarily, and then the referral was made to DSEs to help him find housing. Because the DSEs pulled that background check, he found out that 30 years ago, this man committed a felony. Felony was assault against a police officer. So this is why his housing was being denied. The DSEs took this gentleman and said, write your story, write a letter, let me help you. The gentleman wrote a letter, and what a DSEs is actually got the 69-year-old man in front of one of our owners. As the gentleman walked in with the walker, the owner knew he was not going to be a threat at all. With that success story, he has been housed. We're very excited about that. This is very similar to the work that we do with Community Choice, although we focus more on the participants with intensive relationship with those folks. This year, this program is just so exciting. We added more participant programs. So we did an outreach effort. We mailed out 200 letters to families living in areas of concentrated poverty and families living in areas of concentrated poverty with more than 50% of people of color. Out of that, we got 61 who attended our program orientations, where they learned about the program, presented it to them, told them that they had to sign up for a 2-year contract and what kind of that entailed, setting up goals. 30 people signed up at that initial orientation or initial meetings. Those initial meetings were all held in the families' homes so that we could get connected with them one-on-one. 27 of those people signed up for the program contracts. Total right now, we have a total of 57 families that are on the program, and we're also very excited to tell you that word is getting out. So not only are we recruiting, but they're also picking up the phone and calling us. My friend, my whatever, I know that they are on this program, and I'm very interested too. How do I sign up? We're very excited about that. To make the program successful, of course, it does take money. And we have two pots that we can help our families with that are truly important. I think we're truly successful because we do conduct that background check and credit checks before we even start working with the families, so we know what their barriers are. Maybe the families don't even know that they have a UD on their record or what actually their credit scores are. So we're educating them. This allows us to work on their credit scores or their criminal histories in an effort to decrease their barriers to housing. Once the barriers are mitigated and we have access to those dollars, we can help a family move into the area of their choice. So with those, of course, we have moving costs. We help pay with application fees, security deposits, and sometimes we don't even have to pay the application fee if we can show them the background check right up front. So that's very, very helpful. We do help them with moving, and sometimes they need storage units, and also bridging fees for furniture. Integration dollars have been very key to helping our families move into the area of their choice. We have paid for post-secondary certifications. We have made sure that families have equal access to the internet, and for their children to access school activities, such as the math and science clubs, or maybe it's violin lessons, or on the outset, it could be hockey. Make sure that they can play included in their schools in the areas in which they live. Other needs also include transportation issues. So we've issued bus passes, or maybe it's that car repair that's going to make them either be able to keep that job or lose that job. Another one we have done is down payment assistance for an actual vehicle for a family. So what have we accomplished? I think a lot. 117 families have completed our tenant education workshops. Those families are telling us, leaving, and telling us what a great program it is. They're telling us now they feel more comfortable having those discussions with their landlords where maybe they were just too fearful before. They're learning how to speak to their neighbors politely and also getting integrated into neighborhoods. Participants from the financial literacy classes, again, have told us they have now understand the importance of a budget, and they set up their goals to increase their credit scores. Before, maybe they knew what their credit score was, or maybe they didn't. But they had no way, or they didn't have the resources to help them fix it. Now we can. 88% of our families are employed or enrolled in some sort of post-training or secondary education. Participants who were surveyed, after we had on the program, they have only great things to say about it. Their two highest things that they value are assistance with housing search because of the tight rental market and the communication with their senior outreach coordinators. So with that, I would like to introduce Ryan Leifheit, our senior outreach coordinator, to present to you the details of the participants on the program.
Thank you, Tammy. I know we have one question.
Thanks for all this.
Yeah.
How many families have actually been, since 2015 when we started, how many families have actually been relocated into higher opportunity communities?
Councilmember Chair, Councilmember Director. We have 18 families.
Okay, thank you.
Let's continue.
Mr. Chair, council members, thank you. My name is Ryan Ottenheim Leifheit. I am the Senior Outreach Coordinator here with our Community Choice Program, and I'd like to tell you a little bit more today about our families, the people that we're actually working with. Many families participating in the Community Choice Program embark on their personal journeys to self-sufficiency, a term that is, determined by the family themselves. Through one-on-one goal setting with our outreach coordinators, families generally set up goals that fall into one of these 6 categories. Families and their outreach coordinators work on improving wellness for our families, creating educational opportunities, developing goals that will improve their children's lives, or helping families find access to work or housing. Families identify goals that improve their entire family's financial well-being as one of their primary goals. Families who choose to work on financial goals overwhelmingly report they would like to work on improving their credit. This is a great first step in the process to planning for further wealth building through home ownership. While many families are in a situation to plan and save for home ownership, some families are in the situation where they would like to create a budget or open their first checking or savings account. Families who identify wanting to improve their credit do so for a good reason. 86% of families that work with our program have found out through our background and credit check that we run at the beginning of the program that they have fair or poor credit, that is a score at or below 699. However, 14% of the families working in our program have found that they have very good or even excellent credit, one as high as 806. While helping our families understand and improve their credit is an important part of helping families reach their financial goals, we also emphasize the role that pursuing education can lead to in building a family's wealth. Most all of our families have a goal to either return to or complete post-secondary education or work on a certification program, while some of our families are still trying to work on a GED or some simply learn how to read. For our families who are pursuing certifications, some of our families hope to pass the commercial driver's license test, some hope to become a registered nurse or achieve certification as a child development associate. Helping families achieve their goals with these certifications will help families get something more than a job, but a career that will help their entire family build wealth and stability. For families who are seeking further employment, the vast majority are planning with the help of their outreach coordinator to find a job. The 77% of families who identify finding a job as an important goal are not necessarily looking to exit unemployment, but are seeking to find a career in the field of their choosing, find access to better hours or better benefits, or find a place of employment in their new community. Other families are setting goals to achieve a promotion at their current job through working on improving communication, interview, or resume skills, while others are hoping to invest in their own business that provides them with fulfillment and financial stability. As part of the holistic case management and goal setting approach we take in the Community Choice Program, we also challenge families to work on improving their overall wellness. Many families identify the goal of getting a driver's license, adequate insurance, and their own vehicle as an important wellness goal. While all of our families have access to excellent public transportation, many families identify getting a car as getting access to freedom. Freedom to go back and forth to work, take your children to school, and to get groceries on your own time frame. While our families have, other families identify that their wellness would be improved if they lived closer to their social networks, became more involved in their community through volunteerism, or simply made a doctor's appointment or stuck to a healthier diet for the first time in years. As you can see, our families participating in the Community Choice Program are greatly diverse. Providing individualized services to such a varied population takes a great deal of detailed and intensive case management dedicated to meeting each and every family where they are at. Some of the families we work with hope to adopt children or hope to access services for mental health or emotional well-being for their children. Overwhelmingly, the families in our program identify the most important goal in their lives to help their children access better education. When our families believe that their children can and will graduate from high school, they start planning for college by creating a college savings account. This goal, above all else, motivates our families to continue the hard process of working towards self-sufficiency. Mr. Chair and council members, from all of us in the Community Choice Program, I want to thank you for making these services possible. And I'd like to give you the opportunity to hear directly from some of our participants in the Community Choice Program and landlords who have had an opportunity to work with the program.
My name's Sonia Lopez, and I live here in the beautiful city of Roseville, and I've been living here since July of last year. It is a very safe place to live and raise a family. That's very important for myself and for my 4-year-old daughter. Also, they have a lot of work employment here, and they have very good schools.
My name is Jane Anderson, and I am the Vice President of North Star Residential. We manage about 800 units all over the metro area, and we specialize in affordable housing. I think it's important to link families with housing because without a stable place to live, families, especially children, can't thrive and grow up to be responsible adults.
My name is Shanika Greer, and I live in Maple Grove, Minnesota. Some of my other living situations have not been as great as this one has. It didn't feel safe. Our laundry room was constantly being broken into. My daughter was not able to go outside and play, and I lived on the first floor where I had a window to watch her. It wasn't the cleanest place. I felt like I was closed in my own place.
My name is Abshiro Jatani. Neighbors, they're so friendly. Where we're moving in, they came out, they introduced themselves. I just met them, the rest of them. They're so nice, they're so friendly.
I'm Leslie Angel. I'm the Senior Property Management Director for Project for Pride in Living. I've seen it happen a lot where there are small miracles involved when people get housing stability and then their lives start turning around. And it's just a wonderful thing to be able to come to work and be a part of this effort.
I was living in a shelter, me and my child. Things were very hard. I was constantly depressed and crying and wondering when I was going to be able to get my chance to do better in life. I just felt like giving up. But I knew I couldn't because I had my child. I believe I worked pretty hard to get where I am today. I really do feel that. There was nights where I cried looking for work, just trying to get everything together. People coming into this program are single parents, and they do need that assistance to get started. But once they get it, I mean, the sky's the limit.
This neighborhood was really nice, really quiet. It was a family community area. My daughter loves it. It's just me and her, and she is super enthusiastic about being able to live out here. She adores the fact that she has her own nice, clean, spacious room. 2 bathrooms. Who wouldn't want 2 bathrooms?
When we move in here, I don't even worry about anything. They walk outside, they play, and the school is safe. They get it, more education. So I love it. When I work, it is 30 minutes from here. Because of I doing that or because of my kid, to get them a good education, a good living area. It's been mean a lot for me. They're my life.
I'm currently really happy of where I am with employment, but someday I would like to possibly move up, so there's lots of opportunity for that.
When I talk to my friends about what I do for a living, in Section 8 in particular, I think their preconceived notion is that it's the income-based building that perhaps was built in the 70s where everybody pays, a very little amount of rent themselves. And I just try to educate them and let them know that it's not that at all. It's much, much different. It's mostly for working families that are struggling to get by, and they just need a little help.
Everyone needs a little help along the way, but for the most part, it's on you. It's on your shoulders. You have to put in the work, and you have to want it. And I want it for me and for my child.
When we work with the Metro HRA families, we are ensuring that we have guaranteed rent, that the subsidy is on time, that the process that they use and that they help us with cuts down on vacancy loss. There's very few issues working with Metro HRA, so it's really a smooth process and helps stabilize our bottom line.
To have this home is, especially for my kids, it's a very safe area. They have a freedom. They can jump up and down. They can play as long as they want. They can scream however they want it. They love it. They're so happy. Or they goes like, oh, Ma, we can stay here. Don't move. They say they like the school. They made friends. Mom, we wish we stay here forever. They're so happy.
Even though Project for Pride in Living is a nonprofit, we are still a business, and we have a lot of responsibility, not to a particular owner, but to many investors and agencies, to provide exactly the kind of cash flow bottom line that makes our housing secure and viable over the years. Working with Metro HRA helps us in that effort because they work very proactively with us to make sure that our rents are maximized to the allowable extent.
This program has taught me how to be a better renter, and be a better person. I've never spoke with neighbors before, ever. This program has encouraged me to meet my neighbors, build relationships in the community that I want to live in. Now I'm living in Maple Grove, and I want to build that here.
I am very proud of my work and what I do every day. I really feel like I'm contributing to the community and providing housing to people that perhaps wouldn't be able to be housed if we didn't partner with Metro HRA and accept the Section 8 voucher. I guess when I go home at night, I can feel like I've done a little part of something good.
Our presentation for you. We'll entertain any questions if you have them. Otherwise, we'll.
Thank you very much. And I think we have a couple questions. Councilmember Dorfman.
Mr. Chair, I know we're getting late. So I'm just curious, what's the 2-year contract? Because that's a long contract for these families.
The 2-year Mr. Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, the 2-year contract is really so that we can work with them towards their sufficiency goals. One of the things that we tell the owners is that a selling point for the owners is that we are going to be in your unit 4 times per year. So Ryan and her counterpart are going to the family's home and doing quarterly visits. And part of their quarterly visits is to work on goals, integration to the community, but also looking to see are there repairs that need to be made and how are housekeeping things going. And so we ask for them to do that with us for a period of 2 years.
Home visits, I think, are really, really important. That's a long contract for people who have sort of high needs and have had trauma and things in their background. Anyway.
Councilmember Mon.
Mr. Chair, ladies, I just want to thank you for the extraordinary work that you do. I'm so impressed by this project. I have a concept of how much energy it takes to help an entire family get ahead, and I've got to be really proud of this work because I know I am.
Thank you.
I'd like to echo that, and I also think preparing materials like you have in a very easily communicated way, I think is really important, and it's really well done here. So thank you for that. I think that the Metro HRA is, when I'm talking with constituents or other stakeholders, I find that the Metro HRA is one of the sort of unsung heroes of the Met Council. It's not always, doesn't have the same profile as some of our other activities, and I think that is something that we can continue to work to change. And these kinds of messages and the media, I think, are great ways to do that. It's a great story to tell. The question is, are we telling it? So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I would like to suggest that our conversation about the Moving to Work program that Terry Smith was planning to present, that we hold off either for a subsequent CDC or perhaps the full council. I want to make sure we have time, Terry, to really engage in that, because that's a really, a pretty meaningful batch of content that's in that that dialogue. So. With that, unless there's any new business, I think we'll be adjourned. Thank you very much.